Okay, so sorry for the late start, but we're going to get underway with Kashrut Part 2. So the last time we met on Kashrut, which was 2 weeks ago, because last week we did a Q&A, it was 2 weeks ago, and when we got together and we talked about Kashrut, then we talked about which animals are kosher, which ones are not. We talked about some of the ideas of removing the blood from the animal. Today we're going to look at one of the biggest question marks that a lot of people have, which is the separation of meat and milk, and also what it means to make an item, a plate, a fork, a pot kosher, and then we'll do a few extra little bits at the end. Sound good?
Yes.
All right, so that's our plan. So meat and milk, well, very famously, 3 times in the Torah, we are told, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk. Kid, meaning, of course, baby goat. We get that in Deuteronomy 14 and Exodus 23 and Exodus 34. Now, Yoredea, the Shulchan Aruch, tells us that the word kid, the goat, is not specific. It is the same rule with ox, sheep, and goat. There is no difference if it is the milk of the mother or of another domesticated animal. Rather, the verse refers to the common case. So we're not saying that the only thing you're not allowed to do is eat the meat of a baby goat with the milk of the mother goat. What we're saying is this was something that people did, and that kind of thing don't do. The same way, as I mentioned, I think when we talked about this briefly last time, when the Torah tells us to return your neighbor's lost ox, it doesn't mean you only have to return the ox, and it doesn't mean only for your neighbor. It means any lost property has to be returned. And so too for all other cases of property damage or other issues. Another example might be the making of a railing around an open roof that people could be walking on and might possibly fall off of. That doesn't mean we only have to make a rail around an open roof. It means we have to be protective in any similar type circumstances. So this idea of not boiling a kid in its mother's milk is talking about a common occurrence, at least in the days of the Torah. And that is what we are going to use as our example of a category of things that we don't do. Make sense? Okay. So why? Well, because they are the commandments. Now, the house of Rabbi Eliezer taught that the Torah states, you shall not boil a kid in its mother's milk, the verse we just talked about. But because it says it 3 times, it's trying to teach us 3 different rules. 1, that we have a prohibition on eating. 2, we have a prohibition on deriving benefit. And 3, we have a prohibition on cooking. So if someone was to cook it for themselves and then eat it, they would break 3 commandments because it's stated 3 times. On the other hand, if someone was to cook it and sell it to someone, they would be getting 2. They would be breaking 2 commandments, the cooking and the benefit. If someone was just to cook it and give it away, they would be breaking only 1 commandment. But or if someone else cooked it and gave it to them and they only ate it, they would be breaking 1 commandment. But the idea being that the triple repetition is showing us that there are 3 separate prohibitions here. That's not always the case in every category of commandment, but this one seems to be especially cautioned against, that we shouldn't be involved in this in any way. One little important aside, especially if you happen to be working in the catering industry and you're wondering, well, wait a minute, if I work at McDonald's, am I allowed to, serve a cheeseburger to a customer? The prohibition only counts if you are using kosher meat and kosher cheese. So trust me, McDonald's is not using kosher meat. And therefore, if you are making and selling cheeseburgers in a regular type McDonald's, you are not violating this commandment. Still shouldn't eat it because it's definitely not kosher meat, but you would not be violating this part of the commandments. You'd be violating the don't eat meat that was taken from an animal that wasn't properly slaughtered and that the milk had not been removed of, and as we'll see, other issues having to do with its parts. Good? All right. So that means since we are dealing with meat and milk in most kitchens, unless we're vegetarian, we have to be people of